Good afternoon and welcome to this Canada School of Public Service event on the role of managers throughout the procurement process. Bonjour, je m'appelle Emilio Franco et je suis le directeur exécutif de la direction de l'approvisionnement et du matériel au bureau du contrôleur général du secteur du Conseil du Trésor du Canada. J'aimerais commencer en reconnaissant que les terres sur lesquelles nous nous réunissons est le territoire traditionnel non cédé de le peuple algonquin à Anishinaabe. Je sais que les participants proviennent des différentes régions du pays et qui travaillent donc peut-être sur des territoires autochtones différents. Je vous invite à réfléchir au territoire sur lequel vous vous trouvez pendant quelques instants. Il s'agit d'une séance bilingue, donc n'hésitez pas donc d'utiliser la langue officielle de votre choix pour le temps des questions. Pour cette séance, j'ai le plaisir d'être accompagné de mes collègues Maxime, Marie-Hélène et puis Noshina, qui se présenteront dans quelques instants. La discussion aujourd'hui porte sur les rôles des gestionnaires tout au long du processus d'approvisionnement. Nous l'abordons sur l'angle distinct des gestionnaires de l'approvisionnement qui posent une riche expérience de l'acquisition des biens et des services. Notre conversation vous permettra d'apprendre que suit l'importance de la collaboration entre les gestionnaires et les autres experts fonctionnels et la façon de répondre aux besoins opérationnels tout en respectant les politiques ainsi que les principes de valeurs d'éthique. Today, you'll hear the term business owner used frequently, and this is a term not to be confused with the owner of a business or a supplier, but really a business owner in the federal public service is the context is a public servant responsible for the business or program area for which a procurement is established. Business owners actually have distinct responsibilities outlined in the Treasury Board's Directive on the Management of Procurement, responsible for defining capabilities, intended business outcomes, and the achievement of those business outcomes and benefits following implementation. In other words, the business owner is the person ultimately accountable for the decision to procure and its outcomes. Most of the time, this is the manager with the budget. Most managers will procure something during their career and assume that role of a business owner. La plupart des temps, vous effectuez des petits achats à moyen d'une carte d'achat ou carte de crédit, par exemple pour acheter du papier et des fournitures du bureau. L'équipe chargée de l'approvisionnement de votre secteur n'interviendra probablement pas, mais il s'agit un approvisionnement. Cependant, de temps en temps, vous devriez acheter quelque chose un peu plus complexe. Peut-être vous avez un besoin de retenir le service d'une consultante pour rédiger un rapport, d'acheter un nouvel équipement pour votre laboratoire ou d'accueillir un nouveau logiciel pour diriger une transformation opérationnelle. Whether you procure regularly or it's your first time, this can be daunting, and you may not know everything you need to do. But that's why every department has a procurement team, procurement experts there to help you along the way. As you'll hear during this session, we encourage you to engage them early and often. At the same time, when the procurement folks get involved, it's not over to you procurement. As a business owner, as a manager, you have important responsibilities that you're not absolved of. The decision to buy, what you're buying, ensuring it's delivered, and importantly, how you conduct yourself with vendors are all core responsibilities that you maintain. And of course, whenever there's money involved, risks about integrity and conflict of interest can clearly follow. We'll be paying particular attention to this in our discussions, as I'm sure many of you here today to find out how you can stay out of trouble when procuring. And I'm sure with the Auditor General's reports from this week, it's fresh on our minds. But don't worry today, we are not here to scare you away. We're here to equip you on how to deal with these scenarios, while, to be honest, instilling a healthy dose of fear needed to respect the rules, sense danger, and navigate challenges. Just like a heavy piece of equipment, if you know how to use the tool, it can be very good and very safe and very helpful, but also a little bit dangerous if you're not using it carefully. Sans plus tarder, je cède la parole aux conférenciers afin que se présenter et vous donner un très bref aperçu de leur rôle respectif dans le domaine de l'approvisionnement. On va commencer avec Maxime.
Merci, Emilio. Donc, moi, je suis Maxime Tauvette, directeur exécutif à EDSC, Employment Social Development Canada. I am in charge of procurement, material management, procurement policy for the Department of ESDC. Ça fait environ 18 mois que je suis avec eux. Avant de me rendre à EDSC, j'ai passé une quinzaine d'années, un petit peu plus, à travaux publics, donc en approvisionnement. J'ai travaillé sur plusieurs grands projets, dont avec Emilio, sur notre système d'achat d'approvisionnement. Ensuite, j'ai travaillé sur le programme de la modernisation des versements des prestations à EDSC, en fait, qui est un genre de programme pour renouveler le logiciel qui est derrière les paiements de prestations canadiens, que ce soit pour l'assurance chômage, l'assurance de vieillesse, des choses comme ça. Puis, juste avant de traverser à EDSC, j'ai passé un an sur le programme de soins dentaires, qui était une priorité du gouvernement. Donc, on a mis un contrat en place avec la compagnie, en fait, qui aide à gérer cette priorité du gouvernement. Donc, j'ai passé toute ma carrière en approvisionnement. Donc, j'en ai vu plusieurs et j'ai des bons conseils où j'ai rencontré des bons clients, des bons propriétaires fonctionnels au travers des années. Donc, je suis excité d'avoir cette conversation aujourd'hui.
Merci, Maxime. Et Marie-Hélène, you're our representative of the manager community today. Donc, si tu veux te présenter, s'il te plaît.
Oui, Marie-Hélène Brisson. Je suis la directrice nationale de l'expérience du visiteur pour Parc Canada. Oui, je suis l'anomalie sur le panel aujourd'hui. Ça fait 10 ans que je suis à Parc, puis c'est principalement là où j'ai mon expérience en tant que gestionnaire fonctionnel pour plusieurs contrats. Certains d'entre vous ont peut-être réservé du camping dans votre vie en allant dans les parcs nationaux. C'est un des très gros contrats que mon équipe gère, entre autres, ou ce qui est au niveau des expositions, l'interprétation, toutes sortes de choses qui sont en lien avec les 23 millions de visiteurs qui viennent à Parc Canada à chaque année. C'est des contrats nationaux. Multiples provinces et territoires utilisent ces contrats-là, donc beaucoup de défis. Donc, j'ai hâte de partager cette expérience-là avec vous aujourd'hui.
Excellent. Noshina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Noshina Wright. I'm currently the Acting Director General of Procurement and Investment Management at Health Canada. I have been at Health for about 10 years, mostly in procurement, but I've recently expanded my horizons, and I'm now doing not only procurement operations and procurement policy reporting and oversight, but also investment planning and project management, and I also have material management under myself as well. At Health, we are in a shared services partnership, so we serve both Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada, and we provide centralized procurement services for both. I've been in procurement since day one in the government. I entered in as an intern officer through PSPC and have had a couple of stints at Statistics Canada and Natural Resources Canada, but finally landed at Health, which I love. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So the first, so we'll have a bit of a question and answer period with the panel, and then we'll be opening up the floor to questions. So if you're online, please get your questions ready in the chat, and in the room, just get yourselves ready. We will have microphones. So just to kick things off, managers that are in the room listening in, they've probably been hearing a lot about procurement in the news. They're wondering, like, am I doing procurement? Do I have responsibilities? Like, when does that really kick in? Donc, pour Maxime et puis Marie-Hélène, à quel moment devient le propriétaire, à quel moment est-ce qu'un gestionnaire devient le propriétaire fonctionnel? Quels sont ses principaux rôles et responsabilités et quelles sont les compétences dont besoin de gérer les risques les plus importants dans le processus d'approvisionnement?
Non, c'est une bonne question. C'est une question qui est souvent soulevée par nos clients. Nous, on appelle nos propriétaires fonctionnels, nos clients en approvisionnement. Puis c'est une question que, à la base, est très simple. Est-ce que tu es la personne qui a besoin d'une chose ou d'un service? Donc, c'est là que tu deviens vraiment un propriétaire fonctionnel, a business owner, as we call them in English. So, once you essentially identify a need for, either goods or services for your program, for whatever you're trying to run in your department as a public servant, that's kind of where you become a business owner. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Bien évidemment, ça l'entraîne une panoplie de responsabilités, de rôles à jouer. Je dirais que le premier rôle, en fait, le plus gros, c'est vraiment, à la base, est-ce que tu as besoin d'un approvisionnement? Donc, la première chose que tu devrais te poser comme question quand tu deviens un propriétaire fonctionnel, quand tu as un besoin, c'est est-ce que la façon de remplir ce besoin-là, d'obtenir ce service ou ce bien, c'est en faisant un approvisionnement. Puis je ne dis pas ça parce que je veux diminuer les volumes de mon équipe puis on ne veut pas faire d'approvisionnement, mais c'est vraiment la question que vous devez vous poser à la base. Et la raison est simple, c'est qu'il y a plusieurs façons d'obtenir les choses au gouvernement, puis Emilio y a parlé, on voit souvent des approvisionnements dans les nouvelles qui se ramassent dans les journaux. Souvent, c'est soit parce qu'il y a eu des erreurs ou parce que peut-être que l'approvisionnement, ce n'était pas la meilleure façon d'obtenir ces services. Donc, c'est la question que vous devriez vous poser en premier lieu. Puis c'est quelque chose que vous faites à chaque jour sans y penser. Je parlais avec Emilio et Nishina juste avant de s'asseoir ici, puis juste pour me rendre ici, j'ai pris ces décisions-là en tant que propriétaire fonctionnel de savoir comment je me rends à la salle. J'aurais pu payer pour prendre le train, qui est un approvisionnement de services de train. J'aurais pu marcher, où ça ne m'aurait coûté rien. J'ai décidé de prendre le stationnement, prendre ma voiture, puis payer, faire un approvisionnement pour payer pour le stationnement. Donc, c'est certain que c'est la première chose à vous demander. Puis, la façon dont vous allez acheter des choses, c'est là que vos services d'approvisionnement, ils vont vous aider. Nous, on est formés, mon équipe, on est formés pour connaître tous les politiques, toutes les règles de l'approvisionnement. Puis, en faisant vos décisions, bien, on va vous rappeler, avez-vous pensé aux normes d'accessibilité? Avez-vous pensé à la politique verte, le Green Procurement? Puis ça s'applique même dans mon exemple. J'aurais pu, pour être plus vert, j'aurais pu choisir de prendre ma bicyclette, me rendre ici en bicyclette. Une norme d'accessibilité, comment j'étais pour me rendre au bureau. Fait que, c'est un petit peu le rôle des agents d'approvisionnement, mais vous autres, en tant que propriétaire fonctionnel, c'est vraiment est-ce que j'ai un besoin? Puis, deuxièmement, par la suite, si vous identifiez que oui, en effet, j'ai un besoin, est-ce que ça s'explique bien? Puis je ne dis pas juste pour vous-même, pour vous rassurer dans votre programme, mais si vous parlez à vos amis, si vous parlez à votre famille, des gens que vous rencontrez sur la rue la fin de semaine, est-ce que ça s'explique bien qu'on a utilisé de l'argent du gouvernement pour acheter la chose que vous avez besoin? Est-ce que c'est la façon la plus écologique d'obtenir ce que vous avez besoin? Est-ce que ça a été fait de façon ouverte, juste, où tout le monde a pu eu la chance de participer dans votre processus d'approvisionnement? Donc, c'est des questions que vous devriez vous poser en tant que propriétaire fonctionnel. Je vais m'arrêter là pour laisser Marilyn sauter un petit peu, mais je peux parler un petit peu plus après pour le type de responsabilité puis de rôle comme tel.
Bien, pour faire un petit peu de pouce sur ce que Maxime dit, quand on pose la question à partir de quel moment, bien, c'est jour 1. Moi, quand je parle à mes gestionnaires ou aux superviseurs qui ont des responsabilités contractuelles à la première journée, je veux qu'ils soient impliqués. C'est pas l'équipe d'approvisionnement qui vont nous approcher pour nous dire « tu as besoin d'un nouveau système de points de vente », c'est nous qui doivent vous approcher. Donc, dès la première journée, si on veut que le produit, ça explique un peu ce que tu disais aussi, si on veut que le produit dont on a besoin soit exactement ce qu'on veut, il faut être impliqué dès le départ. Je ne m'attends pas à ce que mon équipe ou moi-même j'aie les connaissances complexes que vous avez en approvisionnement au niveau des lois et tout ça. Par contre, je connais mes obligations et mes autorités financières, puis je m'attends à ce qu'on connaisse en général les différents types d'outils. Mais c'est vraiment l'équipe d'approvisionnement de Parc Canada qui vont nous outiller puis nous aider là-dedans, avec d'autres équipes d'approvisionnement quand on a besoin d'aller avec Travaux publics ou avec le Conseil du Trésor. Mais je ne verrai jamais un contrat qui soit mis en place où mon équipe n'est pas impliquée parce qu'on représente, comme je répétais tantôt, les 23 millions de visiteurs qui viennent dans nos lieux. Donc, pour avoir un produit de qualité qui en vaut la peine. L'autre chose que je répète souvent, c'est qu'en tant que directrice, c'est mon autorité, c'est moi qui les signe, les contrats. Et je me pose toujours la question, Maxime l'a quand même dit, si mon président se fait demander d'aller au Parlement pour aller justifier le contrat que je viens de signer, est-ce que je suis à l'aise? Puis quand j'ai un doute, c'est qu'il faut retourner à la table à dessin où il faut s'asseoir ensemble parce que ça veut dire que ça ne fonctionnera pas. Je pense que c'est vraiment, vraiment important de se poser ces questions-là.
Je pense que quelque chose que tu as touché aussi qui est important, tu as mentionné, de bien définir. Tu parles d'un système et définir. Ça, c'est un rôle qui est extrêmement important comme propriétaire fonctionnel. As a business owner, one of your key responsibilities is defining exactly what you're trying to procure. And I'm not saying, that doesn't mean I'm talking about putting hundreds of pages of requirements and going all the way down to like the little bolts and nuts of everything you want to buy. But it's about being clear, right? So if you're trying to buy a table, for example, not just write a statement of order that says, I need a table. Well, do you want a round table like this one? Do you want a square table? Do you want it to be this high, this high? How many legs do you want? These are the things I think you need to consider as well as a business owner. Marilyn talked about it. Our team is there to support you, but we are not technical experts in what you buy. We know procurement very well. We are experts in that. But you are always, and as a business owner, will always be the expert in the widget that you're buying or the services that you're buying. So it's on you to really be clear about what you buy. I think we've all kind of seen those drawings where it's like, the architect does a drawing, and then the contractor, what he builds, and then at the end what the client really wanted, and then none of the images match. That kind of summarizes the role as a business owner in terms of making sure you're clear in terms of what you want once you've assessed that yes, procurement is the way we want to go forward with.
And so, Nashina, a lot of the times managers will they're approaching this for the first time. They don't know how to define requirements. They don't know, so they're going to need help, right? And so, Marie-Hélène and Maxime have already started to talk about that collaboration between the business owner and the procurement team, and engaging at the very beginning. So, can you elaborate on some good procurement planning and some good examples of where that can really result in success, and how that collaboration can help address problems before they arise?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I give some examples, I want to clarify, procurement planning is not just about, enhancing your timelines and making sure that you can get your project or contract in place. Sorry, I'm saying project because I just switched to project management and I have to get back to the contracting world. To get your contract in place the date that you wanted. But it's also about having success at the end of the day, and also not only engaging with your contracting authorities, but also other key stakeholders along the way so that you can get to that success point. I think the process is really designed to support you. It's to allow you to think about all of the ground that you may need to cover that you may not have thought of from the first place. It'll allow you to look at key risks that you'll have to navigate, any policy obligations, and also to look at your departmental priorities to ensure they're aligned with what you want to buy. The early and ongoing collaboration will help identify procurement strategies from the get-go. It could identify risks such as sole sourcing or contracts with former public servants, or any potential conflicts and how to mitigate those. And then also the early engagement with key stakeholders like those in IT, security, privacy, accessibility, legal, the list goes on and on. Strong planning also allows us to look at the contracting perspective in terms of our overall objectives and policy goals across the Government of Canada, such as opportunities to work with Indigenous businesses, environmental considerations, as well as socio and economic priorities. One other thing that you may not think about too in terms of procurement planning, and that we're looking at health, is we'll look at the whole plan and see if there's any commonalities across all of the input that we get from our branches. So if everyone wants to buy the same table, then maybe we can do one large procurement for the entire department and achieve economies of scale there and better value for money as well for Canadians. In terms of an example, I do have one, and it's still live, it's still ongoing, and we're working through it. At Health, we do have a few projects that we have on the go that require some support from IT consultants and professional services, but this is a spicy topic because, as we probably all know, we are all trying to reduce our reliance on professional services, especially within IT. That's a broader initiative going on. But the reality is we still have some right now that are midstream projects that require that support. We can't switch to an SBIPS right now, for example. So what we've done is we've collaborated with a few of our key stakeholders to plan out what those projects need. Key stakeholders include our digital transformation branch within Health Canada, our project management office, our business owners, of course, and the project managers, and procurement. And we're looking at an assessment of that. We're planning out what we will need, and we're going out strategically out on the street to make sure they're focused requirements that are going out and not umbrella contracts, if you will. So this is, of course, allowing for us to reduce the risk of not having that coverage, but also having a transformative approach that is still compliant with what we're trying to achieve in this space.
Thank you. And actually, I mean, consultants is a very au jour thing to bring up. It's an opportunity for me to highlight that Treasury Board did release a manager's guide, so not for the procurement officer, but for managers, on key considerations when procuring professional services. And it asks a lot of the questions that we've already been talking about today, which is, first of all, do you really need that consultant? Could you hire someone? Is there some other, can you do a temporary, a student, another resource? Like, is there an alternative? Before you even buy, have you thought about alternatives? And for example, we often hear that managers say, well, I don't have the budget. I have operating budget, but I don't have salary. Mais si tu travailles avec vos agents de finance, il peut faire un transfert opérationnel au salaire. Like you can do a transfer from salary to operational. These are things that you can do to enable. So that's always the first question. And then what outcome are you trying to achieve? We often approach professional services by saying, I need a project manager. Well, what do you actually need as an outcome? What are you trying to achieve? And that way you're not just managing someone that's just sitting there waiting for you to give them work, but they actually have something they have to execute against. They have an outcome they have to deliver on. And then when you finally pay them, you're paying them not for them sitting at a desk or virtual, but you're actually paying them for what they produced. So you're getting better value out of what they've achieved. And so these are things that are highlighted in our manager's guide. I encourage everyone to take a look. Also some nice little tips about how to manage the relationship with consultants as you go through that, because we will still be using consultants, but of course a hard look at how we use them and how we contract with them, really important to reduce our reliance on those consultants.
And I think too, like you mentioned the manager's guide, like the role of a business owner, I think, well, the term business owner is fairly new from a policy perspective. The role has always been there, but us addressing it, I think, that kind of shift or change in terms of the role that the business owner plays has evolved over time as well, right? I think when I think back to when I started in procurement, and you mentioned it a little bit in your opening remarks, it was like, okay, I need to buy a consultant, I need a project manager, it went to procurement, and then, you were begging for your client to kind of come to the table and help you out in procuring it. I think those policies being updated comes out with, more and more there's recognition that as a business owner, it's no longer give it to procurement, and then when they find me my person, they'll tell me my contract's in place and I can get to work. I think your role as a business owner is throughout the process, and then even after the contract's awarded especially, you play a very large role in terms of managing the contract, right? Your contracting authorities are there to support you, but you're the ones, we'll take the consultant example, you're the ones dealing with the project manager, getting the reports, getting the work that they're doing, and if there's any issues with it, you're the ones that are responsible for flagging those to the contracting authority, who can then advise you on how we want to proceed. More and more, you hear as well in the news or in any articles about, is Canada getting value for what they're buying? That's something that should be at the back of your mind constantly, right? So if you're paying for a project manager that we're paying $3,000 a day, and as Emilio was just saying, he's sitting there waiting for you to give him work. Go back to Marilyn mentioned, would you tell your deputy to go to Parliament and explain that? How we paid someone $3,000 a day to sit in our office and wait for us to sign work, right? So I think that responsibility doesn't stop at, okay, I've identified my outcome, I've identified what I need, I wrote it down in a nice statement of work for them. All right, procurement, go and get my contract, and we'll see you in a few months. I think that it's important to keep in mind that your role kind of goes throughout the whole process, even all the way through contract closeout, right?
Absolutely. So we're going to turn to a bit of procurement side, manager side for the next question. Donc, we'll start with Marie-Hélène et puis après ça, Noshina. Donc, on va commencer, Marie-Hélène, avec toi. Donc, quels sont les plus grands défis que vous avez relevés en tant que gestionnaire qui a des responsabilités pour être impliqué dans les approvisionnements?
Dans les dernières années, ça a surtout été parce qu'on a quand même renouvelé des énormes contrats, subséquemment, comme en même temps, un peu alignés. Ça a été de faire comprendre à notre équipe de gestion supérieure qu'on ne peut pas faire un contrat sur le coin d'un bureau. On a l'impression que c'est toujours une tâche qui est juste comme, ça va être facile, là. De toute façon, je vais le donner à l'agent de procurement, d'approvisionnement, c'est un peu ce que Maxime disait tantôt. Ce qui n'est pas vrai quand tu es le responsable du contrat, puis que généralement, c'est parce que si on va aller chercher ces contrats-là, c'est parce qu'on veut innover, c'est parce qu'on veut améliorer un service. Donc, si c'est le cas, on doit être vraiment impliqué dans sa définition, dans son implémentation, puis aussi de voir les suivis par la suite. Donc, une des choses qui a été un bon défi pour nous, c'est de faire comprendre qu'on avait besoin d'une équipe particulière, pas très grosse, 4 à 5 personnes, pour faire un renouvellement des services de réservation en ligne, de points de vente et de vente en ligne. Mais souvent, je me faisais demander à chaque année, « Mais t'as fini, là, c'est correct, ils peuvent retourner. » Non, c'est long, ça nous a pris 7 ans à se rendre. Pour éventuellement, l'équipe de gestion réaliser, « OK, mais une fois que tu as fini un contrat, ils peuvent faire autre chose, comme il y a un autre contrat en arrière. » Oui, il y a un autre contrat en arrière qui s'en vient parce qu'après 4 ans, tu sais, on regarde nos années d'option et on renouvelle. Mais ces gens-là se sont immersés du sujet, puis ils connaissent bien maintenant autant la relation avec l'équipe d'approvisionnement que leurs responsabilités au niveau des services numériques avec notre équipe d'études numériques à Parc. Donc, la valeur d'avoir des gens qui ne sont pas des experts en approvisionnement, mais qui peuvent naviguer dans la gestion de projet, Noshina en a parlé tantôt, là, un peu comme ça a été mon plus grand défi de dire, OK, mais ça n'arrivera jamais si on les laisse sur le coin d'un bureau. Ça va toujours être la dernière chose qu'on pense faire et on va faire des erreurs et on va avoir des contrats qui vont valoir peut-être trop cher ou on va avoir un consultant assis à rien faire. Fait que si on veut vraiment avoir une valeur pour ce qu'on paye, il faut mettre aussi le temps de nos équipes là-dedans.
C'est exact. Et souvent, on trouve, pas souvent, mais on trouve que les gestionnaires doivent vraiment savoir que ça a besoin de leur attention sur le contrat, sur les livrables. Et c'est pas quand le contrat est en place, l'agent d'approvisionnement ne sont pas souvent impliqués. C'est vraiment le gestionnaire. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that the managers really need to be aware of is that like the management of the deliverable, making sure the work is getting done, making sure that the report that was written, you've reviewed it, and it's what you've expected, and it's meeting the quality, the requirements, and so on. That's the manager's responsibility. It's not the procurement officer's responsibility. If there's issues, procurement gets involved, and you can navigate, maybe a tough discussion with the vendor of saying, no, I'm sorry, what you delivered does not meet the requirements, and we're not going to pay you until it meets that standard. But that's the manager's job. And so you can't just be, waiting on the sideline. You have to be making sure you're diligent. If you've got time sheets that you're looking at them, was the time worked? Making sure that's documented on file, as we're seeing in some of the audits, things that may have been absent. But, what's coming out in audits is really, did we get value for what, as we keep saying, did we get value? So that's the manager's responsibility, making sure we got value and making sure that we documented that we did our diligence, ensuring that what was delivered was the value that we expected.
And that second point is key, I think, like documenting it, right? And I don't want to jump ahead into Sheena.
You guys are stealing my thunder.
Yeah, I'll let you talk to your boss. But documenting it is key point in terms of the responsibility of a business owner to make sure that, when there's an audit and you've left the department, that we still have the documentation that, oh yeah, we did get value for this contract. Yeah. But I'll let, sorry, Noshina.
And so over to Noshina, what are you seeing, and you can talk about documentation as well, because this is probably one of the biggest challenges, but what are you seeing as the challenges the managers that you're dealing with are facing, like from your vantage point?
Yeah, and I think we've, since the beginning, we've touched on it in a few areas. So one is I do find sometimes business owners are not super knowledgeable about procurement, only simply because maybe they only do 1 or 2 contracts a year, if that. And then during that 1 year, procurement can change. I mean, in the last 2 years, procurement has changed enormously in terms of our policy requirements and whatnot. So keeping up with that is nearly impossible for someone who's doing it maybe on the side of their desk or does it once or 2 times a year. So I think that unfamiliarity with the procurement rules can be a challenge. I see it often. And then, of course, compliant documentation to support that. Sometimes I see that business needs are not clearly defined from the forefront, and then that can lead to many challenges down the road. If your statement of work from the beginning is not clear, and then you didn't get what you asked for at the end of the day, then you're not getting value for money, and you may have to start the whole procurement process over again to get what you actually wanted, let alone dealing with the vendor performance issues if there are any. The unclear business requirements can have a lot of effects, such as scope creep as well, vendor lock-in, procurement delays, or mismanagement at the end of the day. Another thing I find sometimes is conflicting heads, I guess, between procurement and the business owner, because sometimes we're looked at as a barrier or the bad guys, but what we really are is your strategic enabler. We're trying to help you. We're a partner. We are not your enemy. We're your friends. If we help you, you help us, because I think we all want to get to the same point. We want you to be successful in your contract, but we also want the contract to be in alignment with our legislation and policies and compliance. So we all want the same thing, and it's easier if we work together rather than separately. And early engagement and procurement planning helps with that. I'll put that pin in there. One other item I see often is in terms of security, privacy, and compliance. These are new spaces, I think, or new-ish spaces for some business owners, and they don't realize the implications that it could have on their procurement, and they don't plan for it accordingly. So that could lead to unplanned delays. So especially with IT, I find. So if you find that that could be a part of your process, make sure to engage early so that you can avoid those surprises later on. And another one I had was in terms of the side desk. It's your side job, which is natural, but that means that you have to lean more heavily on your procurement advisors and your experts. Most departments have checklists or centers of expertise that you can tap into, so make sure you go to them. And the last one I had is about articulating value for money, which you almost also touched on, Emilio. And that leads back to the strong definition of your requirement, strong evaluation criteria. If you're lacking in those areas, it will have a trickle effect when your contract is awarded and you're seeing it's not being as fruitful as you wanted it to be, or the outcomes are not where you want it to be and they don't reflect what you want. So how can you mitigate these? What can you do? Engage early. Early collaboration, not only with procurement, but with your key stakeholders in those areas that I've already mentioned. Plan, plan, plan as much as you can. I know it's really hard, but it will help you at the end of the day. It'll help those around you that are touching on your procurement process as well. Make sure that you can have as clearly defined statements of work and procurement evaluation criteria if you are going competitive. It's based on what Max said. It doesn't have to be 100 pages, but it has to be clear and concise so that the industry knows what you want as well. Participate in sessions like this. So, go to training. There's a lot that's offered out there, and there's a lot of great resources. Take that upon yourselves to do that, and talk with those within your department as well. There's probably resources you don't even know that are there that are available. And the directive on the management of procurement does have very clear information about what your accountabilities are in procurement, as well as some annexes that are specific to professional services. So please take a look at that. And then in terms of monitoring the contract and vendor performance, Emilio mentioned that, you have an obligation throughout the entire duration of the contract from start to end to monitor the deliverables that you asked for. If you see problems, flag them immediately to contracting. They will help you to figure out what to do as a next step. They may even engage legal with you, things like that. So don't be scared. We're here to help support.
And I find often we try to be good Canadians with our suppliers sometimes, right? Like friendly, we don't want to upset them, but vendors, we can have friendly relationships with them, but they have financial interests in mind, and our job is to protect the financial interests of the crown. And so you don't have to accept a deliverable that isn't good quality. Work with your contracting officer if you feel that there's a big issue here that needs to be resolved. But don't be afraid to push back. I know they bring their high-priced talent to the room, and they sometimes are intimidating in their fancy suits, but or otherwise. But push back, protect the crown. That's your job as a manager. And where we really don't get good value is when we accept the thing that we're not going to use because it wasn't what we were looking for. That's the worst. The report that goes on the shelf because it wasn't quite good, but we'll just accept it and move on. That's poor value for money. Tu as parlé aussi au côté de sécurité, et on a noté dans le rapport de vérificateur général que la sécurité est un élément on n'est pas toujours suivant des processus. Donc, le besoin de vérifier que les codes de sécurité sont en place pour les fournisseurs, pour les consultants, avant qu'ils commencent le travail. Managers have a lot of responsibilities that go beyond just procurement: security, accessibility, environmental, all sorts of policies. And so it's tough. And procurement is there to help you with certain ones. But you mentioned earlier, Noshina, the involvement of all your other stakeholders, right? And so if you've got people coming in from on a contract, talk to your security office. What do we need to be doing? Is there anything that needs to be in place before they start? What do we need to check? Are there any restrictions on what they can do when they're in, on what equipment they can touch, on can they access the network? These are things that you have experts in your organization there to help you make sure that you're following the rules, because there's lots of different rules. Managers aren't expected to know all of them, but as a manager, you are expected to know where to go to get help, and that's a kind of core piece. Donc, on va pour la dernière question avant qu'on tourne les questions des participants. Basé sur votre expérience, based on your experience, we're starting to touching on that integrity element a little bit. So, How do we ensure that procurements are done with the utmost integrity, particularly in the context of heightened sensitivity, security? As I mentioned in the beginning, procurement's gotten quite scary, and it's fine if you get the right help, but that healthy dose of fear. So let's talk a little bit about integrity in procurement. I'll start maybe with Maxime.
Sure. Non, c'est une bonne question. Puis, je parlais un petit peu plus tôt de le rôle qui a évolué. Puis, dans vos mises à jour avec les politiques du Conseil du Trésor, en lien avec le rôle du propriété fonctionnelle, il y a aussi le côté valeur éthique qui revient souvent. Donc, je pense, quand on parle de faire des approvisionnements avec de l'intégrité qui ne se ramassent pas dans les nouvelles, pour les mauvaises raisons, c'est arrivé dans les nouvelles pour les bonnes raisons, mais ça commence avec vous, évidemment, avec les individus qui participent dans le processus. Donc, en tant que fonctionnaire, on a tous la responsabilité de suivre le code de valeur éthique. C'est encore plus important quand on fait des choses avec le public, qui inclut des fournisseurs ou pour livrer des services pour le public. Donc, je pense que ça commence là. You mentioned, there's a lot of procurement rules and guidelines, and it can be scary. There's a thing I like to say, and I think some of my colleagues have heard me say this many times in our department, but procurement is not there to, put sticks in your wheels, right? Like, we recognize that our role is not directly to provide services to Canadians. We're there to support you in your job as, running programs that ultimately benefit Canadians. I guarantee you there's no one on my team, and I'm going to speak for Nashina's team, that sits there in the morning and think about ways, how can we complicate life for our business owners? Like, can we slow this program down and then just go and have a beer and laugh about it afterwards? Like, that's not the procurement role. On n'est vraiment pas là pour vous mettre des bâtons dans les roues. Ce qu'on fait, dans le fond, c'est pour vous protéger. Notre rôle, c'est un petit peu ça. On a des politiques, des règlements, des guides qui sont développés dans le but ultime de faire certain que vous ne vous ramassez pas dans les nouvelles parce que vous avez fait quelque chose sans le savoir. On a parlé plusieurs fois, je pense, aujourd'hui, dans le sens où on dit que nos propriétaires fonctionnels ne connaissent pas l'approvisionnement. C'est pas dit méchamment, c'est parce que c'est pas votre rôle. Juste comme que moi, je connais pas, je suis pas un expert en sécurité, en ressources humaines ou en quoi que ce soit. Nous, on est des experts en approvisionnement. Puis quand on dit non, vous ne devriez pas faire ça, c'est pas parce qu'on veut vous rendre la vie difficile, c'est vraiment pour vous protéger. Donc, quand on parle de faire des processus d'approvisionnement avec intégrité, je pense que ça commence évidemment avec ça, mais aussi avec l'ouverture, la transparence. Je le compare souvent à quelqu'un qui se confie dans son avocat, puis qui veut lui dire qu'est-ce qu'il veut faire, mais ça reste entre nous deux. Les agents d'approvisionnement peuvent être dans le même sens. Un des enjeux qu'on voit souvent, c'est que le propriétaire fonctionnel va nous cacher un petit peu son but ultime de ce qu'il essaie de faire. C'est pas nécessaire. Vous pouvez être ouvert avec vos agents d'approvisionnement, dire que, regarde, je comprends que le processus c'est comme ça, mais pour telle et telle raison, j'aimerais qu'on dévie un petit peu puis qu'on fasse ça. Nashina puis moi, on était sur une autre discussion comme ça la semaine dernière pour les agents d'approvisionnement. Puis une des choses qu'on a discuté, c'est que l'approvisionnement, c'est pas noir et blanc. Oui, il y a plusieurs politiques, il y a plusieurs guides, il y a plusieurs choses en place qui gèrent le processus, mais il y a aussi beaucoup de flexibilité. C'est là que quand Nashina parlait d'engager avec les différents experts des différents domaines, ça inclut vos experts d'approvisionnement. Engager avec eux, discuter avec eux tôt dans le processus, puis ils vont pouvoir vous aider à gérer. Si vous essayez de faire quelque chose qui dévie un petit peu des politiques normales, ils vont vous aider à identifier le risque que ça cause. En tant que propriétaire fonctionnel et du côté de l'approvisionnement, on peut décider ensemble si c'est un risque comme ministère, on peut tolérer, présenter ça à la haute gestion, puis ensuite aller de l'avant avec notre approche. Fait que, pour avoir l'intégrité, quand il y a des revues, the Auditor General comes out with reports, it's not always about, well, you didn't follow the policy exactly how it's supposed to be. Souvent, c'est que oui, vous avez dévié la politique, mais vous n'avez pas expliqué pourquoi. Vous n'avez pas dit pourquoi. Donc, nous, on prend pour acquis que ça a été fait de mauvaise foi, puis là, c'est là que le rapport est un petit peu plus négatif. Donc, c'est correct de dévier, mais c'est important de savoir de quoi on dévie, premièrement, d'accepter le risque que ça apporte, puis faire certain que c'est bien documenté, que oui, dans ce cas-là seulement, on dévie parce qu'il y a une telle et telle raison qui l'explique. Donc, quand on parle d'intégrité, c'est un petit peu ça aussi, d'être ouvert avec le processus, d'être transparent, non seulement avec les fournisseurs, mais à l'interne même avec tes différents conseillers d'approvisionnement, sécurité, IT, tout ça. Là.
One of the things I often say in procurement for anyone is that, like, at the end of the day, in procurement, we always talk about fair, open, transparent. And it's what do those mean and how do you apply it? So fairness means that the process is treating everyone equally. It's unbiased, and that there's, like, no matter who you are as a vendor, the process treats you equally. It's not fairness as in that person got an ice cream cone and I didn't. It's fairness in terms of the rules apply to everyone the same way. Openness means that everyone has an opportunity. So it's made, in government procurement, we post our opportunities publicly on Canada Buys, but everyone's got that opportunity. Everyone can participate. The process is open. And transparency means that the rules of the game are available to everyone. You know how the government's going to review your submission. You know how you're going to be evaluated. You know what the terms of that contract are going to be. The rules are clear to everyone. And so when you're a client trying to do something that might be a little bit different, often what procurement will say is, okay, how do we apply these principles of fairness, openness, and transparency to achieve that outcome? And I often say, as long as you're saying what you're going to do, saying it publicly, and doing what you said you would do, in procurement, you can almost do anything within the bounds of law and kind of legal and ethical constraints. So it's a great point. Hélène?
Ben, sans répéter trop, là, je pense qu'il n'y a personne qui arrive à la table qui ne veut pas être intègre là, quand il s'assoit dans un projet. De toute façon, puis je pense que les gens ne le réalisent pas eux-mêmes que c'est ça l'enjeu. T'sais. Ils s'assoient là, puis ils font leur petit quotidien, puis ils ne connaissent pas nécessairement les règles de tout au niveau de la sécurité, au niveau du numérique ou quoi que ce soit, puis ils se mettent dans le pétrin. Donc, pour moi, je pense que c'est de changer aussi tout ce qui est l'aura autour des agents d'approvisionnement. I've heard a lot of "it's a pebble in my shoe, it's kind of a problem". Fait qu'au lieu de voir ça comme ça, pour moi, c'est de voir comme un catalyseur, comme une opportunité. Puis ça fait partie d'un rôle de gestionnaire fonctionnel, d'un directeur ou d'un gestionnaire de section, de s'asseoir avec tous les intervenants à la base, en commençant un projet, puis en disant, bien, on est tous dans le même bateau, là. On a chacun nos petits rôles à jouer, mais on est tous dans le même bateau pour arriver à nos fins. À la base, je pense que les gens qui viennent chercher vos services d'approvisionnement, on est tous des gens qui veulent innover, on est des gens qui veulent moderniser, on est des gens qui veulent que le gouvernement soit vu comme un précurseur, comme avancé, pas comme archaïque et encore en retard. Fait que l'idée, c'est de se mettre ensemble dès le départ. Puis je pense que là, on va gérer peut-être cet enjeu-là d'avoir une perception de manque d'intégrité.
Michelle?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything. And I guess I'll say one more area that we could probably touch on is in terms of mitigating potential conflicts of interest as well to uphold the integrity in the procurement process. So whether that's like real, apparent, potential, conflicts of interest can happen at any point in time throughout the whole procurement process. And it's important to keep that in mind as you're involved with the procurements as well. And sometimes it can be super apparent, like, we're not supposed to award a contract to our spouse. That's clear. We're not supposed to do that. But there could be other times when, you're at a party and you see a potential bidder that is part of your solicitation, and you don't know this person, you don't really communicate with them, but it could be perceived that there could be a bias there and you're involved with that process. So that could be something to keep in mind. And at the end of the day, what you can do is, do your gut check as normal. Or if you think, if we still have newspapers, if you think that this could be a headline on the newspaper one day, that's probably a trigger for you to recuse yourself from the process. One easy way to do this is to just engage with your conflict of interest office. They will help guide you through that and to help you figure out what your pulse check feels and what you should be doing. And do those checks throughout the process as well, like I mentioned. I think that would help as well.
J'aime que tu as mentionné les conflits d'intérêts parce que actuellement, on a lancé un guide sur les conflits d'intérêts dans l'approvisionnement. Ça se fait quelques mois passés. Donc, c'est un guide qui était préparé encore, pas juste pour les agents d'approvisionnement, mais les gestionnaires. Et ça inclut des avis, comment de voir s'il y a des potentiels pour un conflit d'intérêts et comment gérer ça pendant le processus. So, Treasury Board, we like our guides these days. So we have a guide on conflict of interest that we released a couple months ago. That is actually quite helpful in understanding how conflicts of interest can arise in procurement. And they can come from very obvious places, like you mentioned, but also some less obvious places that I think are important to conceptualize and think about how we make sure that those are addressed in a process.
Michelle a soulevé un bon point aussi, speaking of conflict interest. c'est un autre domaine où vous n'avez pas besoin d'être un expert. Si
Oui.
vous n'êtes pas certain, comme Noshine a dit, vous avez des groupes à l'intérieur de vos ministères qui peuvent vous aider. La pire chose à faire, c'est se poser la question si, je ne sais pas si c'est un conflit ou pas, je ne dirais pas rien, puis c'est pas grave. Ça va vous en venir au visage. Il y en a des exemples, plusieurs exemples dans notre monde de l'approvisionnement où il y a des gens que ça donnait que son ami d'enfance, il avait une compagnie puis il n'a pas pensé parce que lui, il ne fait pas l'approvisionnement. Il a fait une compétition, ils se sont fait voir dans un restaurant ensemble, mais c'était des amis de base. Mais la perception était que, ben, regarde, lui, il a gagné un contrat la semaine d'après dans ce ministère-là. C'est à cause de ça qu'ils ont gagné, puis l'approvisionnement a dû recommencer. Fait que si vous n'êtes pas certain, juste de déclarer, puis s'il n'y a pas d'enjeu, ben, votre groupe va vous le dire. C'est pas une question où, s'il y a un conflit, on vous met à la porte, puis vous ne pouvez plus travailler pour le gouvernement. C'est vraiment juste de plus, encore une fois, être transparent, être ouvert, puis dire, regarde, oui, j'ai une relation avec telle et telle personne. S'il y a quelque chose qui arrive, ben, je vais être obligé de m'enlever. Puis ça permet au processus de rouler un petit peu plus.
So, on the subject of integrity, let's talk about, and then we'll turn to questions. The things that, like beyond conflict of interest, what are the little things that managers, well, not little, but the things that managers could encounter that are those kind of mini ethical situations? And I'm thinking, like we actually released recently as part of new procedures a list of things that managers have to sign off on that they didn't do before they award the contract, right? And so that the vendor wasn't involved in preparing the statement of work. And that's something that can happen when you're engaging with vendors, or you have a vendor that you're working with and they're helping input into requirements, and then you release the procurement and they bid on it, right? So these kinds of things create integrity issues. So there's some checklists there to make sure you're following some rules. But maybe we'll touch on just the classic one, and then we'll go to questions. Can you talk to a vendor?
Absolutely. The follow-up is about what? I think that's the bigger question. Je pense que c'est souvent ce qu'il y a aussi, c'est qu'on n'est pas ici pour vous faire peur, puis Emilio l'a mentionné, c'est pas de ne pas avoir de relation avec les vendeurs. C'est important, dans votre rôle de propriétaire fonctionnel, d'avoir une bonne relation avec les vendeurs, mais c'est la façon dont vous le faites. Si vous avez un contrat avec un vendeur, puis vous parlez de choses qui ont rapport au travail, absolument, ayez le plus de conversations que vous pouvez pour s'assurer qu'on a le produit qu'on veut. Où il faut faire attention, puis encore, c'est là que vos agents d'approvisionnement peuvent vous conseiller. C'est par exemple, je ne peux pas aller m'asseoir avec mon ami qui a une compagnie ou la famille qui a une compagnie, puis discuter de, regarde, il y a ce gros contrat-là qui s'en vient, là, on travaille dessus, personne ne le sait, mais prépare-toi, là, tu vas pouvoir mettre ta soumission, puis voici ce que tu devrais faire. Another case, and I'll let you jump in, but another case that we see often, and in light of the changes that the Treasury Board rolled out as well, is you have a consultant that's working with you, and naturally they're in the office together day in, day out. You become close, you work on a thing, and then this contract comes to an end. You still need the services for whatever reason, for another project, for something down the road, and you know what? I've been working with so-and-so, and I think it'd be perfect. So you go and tell them, okay, there's going to be a contract coming out. Go and give your name to such and such company, and then they'll put you forward. So these are examples of things you cannot do. The simple answer, can you talk to the consultant? Yes. Depends about what. And if you're not sure, talk to your contracting officers.
Yeah, as your business owner, that's happened to me a couple of times. The more you do RFPs out there, the more your name is out there, the more they write to you, the more they want to meet with you, the more they have a product to offer you. So I say, go see your values and ethics, folks, because the first time you're like, oh, finally, there's people out there that know what I want. But then when the sixth one comes along, you're like, oh, hold on, maybe I'm doing something. You get excited as a business owner because you're like, somebody who knows what I want. So that's a little touchy, because then you get into a space where when you're going to be renewing, or if it's a bit of a gray zone for me in terms of I like being able to sit. You meet them at conferences. In the recreational world, we have a variety of conferences, and then you show up, right? And you're like, I've been seen with this person. I have their business card. What do I do? It's still interesting because we're in a world of innovating and making sure we stay at the top of the trends in tourism in my world. So it's important, but I manage them really tightly with within the confine of that conference, not special lunch afterwards, right? It's
Well, there's a
tough,
way
though.
to do it too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I think
yeah,
like
but
engaging, and Emilio talked about fairness, openness, transparent. It's fine to talk to suppliers. If you're going to talk to suppliers, be open about it.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to talk to anybody that has any information on this topic.
Yeah.
That way, no one can turn around afterward and say, "Well, you were so friendly with this
Yeah.
one." I also had knowledge of something you wanted, but you didn't give me the chance to share with you. So.
Yeah. No.
Sheena?
Yeah, I generally agree. So yes, I think you can talk to vendors, but you should be cautious, is what I'll say, and be careful how you do it. You don't want to give them the perception that by talking with them, they're going to get a contract from that, or that any quote they give you locks you into that either. So you have to be careful how you word things to them as well. But it's part of market research, right? To see what's out there and what can serve you at the end of the day. But when it comes down to officially getting that requirement, you will of course have to go through contracting. So what I normally tell folks is if you are trying to get a gauge on market in general, do an RFI, which is a request for information, which can be facilitated through your procurement officer and your procurement team, because everyone will then at the same time get the same information at the same time. There is no risk for non-transparency or any bias at that point. So
Demos is another one we see a lot of.
which one? Sorry.
Demos.
Yeah, demos.
Right?
Yeah.
So you'll get clients that say, "Oh, I got contacted by this company. There's no cost, so I'm just going to go and use their software for 6 months." And then to your point, Sheena, you end up in the procurement process, and it's now an unfair advantage that you got to use someone else's software. There's nothing wrong with demos, right? But to take it back to your point, can we talk to suppliers? You can go out, do an RFI, we have many documents in procurement we can use to go out and seek, demos from many companies, and then you get to see all of them. And you'll be way more advanced in your procurement process than if you've done it in the back end. And then we find out, there's a procurement process, and turns out now everything is unfair because we've been using a software for 6 months. Right?
I often say getting market intelligence is important. It's actually encouraged. So, and there's various ways of doing that. But once you're at the point where you're really kind of turning into, I'm writing requirements, I'm in that kind of procurement mode, like that's where it really needs to close things off, start having the conversations through the right procurement channels, and keep things in that, again, fair, open, and transparent. And Sheena, I just want to touch on, because you mentioned, you do have to be careful when you talk to vendors. Like, as a manager, when you're dealing with a business, you are, no matter what level you are and what you may feel about your level, you are representative of the Government of Canada. And if you tell a vendor, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, go and, I'm interested, go and do a little bit of something, and then, I'd like to see what that looks like. You've verbally potentially established a contract. And they can come back and say, hey, well, we just did a month's worth of work. Here's my bill.
And they do.
and they do it. It happens, right? So you do, you are a representative of the Government of Canada when you're engaging with a vendor. You're not just a manager or whatever level you are. And you can say, well, I didn't have the authority to enter into. Well, they don't know that. And so they presume that you're telling them things as the Government of Canada. So it's important to understand that being clear and being careful in terms of those interactions, because you can commit the government to various things. OK, on va tourner aux questions pour ceux et celles dans la salle. On a des micros si tu veux poser des questions. Et puis, on va commencer avec une question en ligne. So we talked a little bit about documentation. It requires work, but do you have any tips for documenting a file well? Anyone on the panel, if anyone wants to take that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do it if you, okay. Yes, do it is my first thing. If you think that if it justifies your contract, if it justifies decisions, it should be on file. So give it to your procurement officer, because they will keep it on file for you. Documentation is extremely important. We all went through a couple of audits this year in terms of procurement, and that was a common theme I saw across the results of the audit. Is there was a lack of documentation to support what happened during the process of a contract, whether it was pre-contract award or post-contract award. So as business owners, you do have an obligation to make sure that you are documenting well. This can be any communications you have with vendors during the process or after when the contract is awarded, whether you're changing maybe some small tweak in your requirement that is allowed through the contract, of course, to just ensure that when you do get a timesheet, it's like, yes, they did X, Y, and Z, and here is my agreement to that. So I think, yes, those are my tips, I guess, is if you just do more than less, I think, is the bottom line for me.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? When you're asking yourself, should I even procure? And can I explain this procurement? Can my deputy go to committee and explain to Parliament that this was a good idea? Anything you have that helps support that should be documented and be kept on file, right? And it's the same as anything else in this process. When you're not sure, should I keep this? Should I not? Ask questions.
Just keep it.
Talk to procurement. Keep it until someone tells you no, it's not needed. But for the most part, it will be, keep it. Especially nowadays, electronically, it's pretty easy to keep everything on your file.
It's not just about like procurement audits. Like what I see a lot right now is IT and cybersecurity audits on some of the products that we buy. So it's a small portion, I guess, of the overall contract that we did, but often because we manage them as projects, they're going to end up in that big pile of elements we save for the procurement. Yeah.
And one of the things, so actually under policy, there is a list of some documentation that has to be there under our policy. It's not all encompassing. But one of the things that we recently added is, who is the business owner? The name of the business owner on the procurement file, because there have been some situations where it wasn't clear who was involved and who's ultimately accountable for making certain decisions. And so we now have a requirement. And again, it's not to scare you, but you, as a manager, as a business owner, your name now has to be in the procurement file clearly as the person that is accountable and responsible as the business owner for that procurement. And I think that's an important piece of accountability, but also, we need that paper trail to know who made the decision. There's a question here that I'll just take. So, est-ce qu'on va avoir des cours dédiés pour les fonctionnaires? There's going to be courses dedicated for business owners. And so, yes, actually, well, right now there are some courses associated with delegated authorities. So there is authority delegation training. We are in the process right now of working with the Canada School to update that training to be reflective of these new the new policies that are in place and the new requirements. So if you're someone with a Section 32 financial delegation authority, that will be a new course that will be coming out in the near future. As well, we are working on updating our procurement courses. And even though the procurement courses are written for procurement officers, particularly the more introductory courses, this is something that would be great for business owners to take because it gives a little bit of the fundamentals. And actually, I think I don't want to say a date here, but sometime later this month, we are launching a new procurement introductory module with the Canada School. That it will be a great place for managers to go to just get that 30-minute overview on what is procurement all about, what are some of the rules, and what are the key some of the key things to think about, and that's a great thing to start there.
If I can throw a plug maybe for my own department, but talk to your contracting officers. I know in our department we do have courses for our clients, for business owners in terms of the basics geared towards our specific department, but it'll give you the basics of what procurement can do. It's very likely that if you talk to your procurement officers, they probably have something like that they can point you to as well in your own department.
C'est le bon point. Donc, si tu veux des autres conseils sur l'approvisionnement, même si tu n'as pas un approvisionnement en cours, votre équipe d'approvisionnement probablement ont des conseils, des guides, des formations, ou peut juste s'asseoir avec toi et parler un peu de peut-être tes besoins, est-ce que ça va être vraiment un approvisionnement, même si tu as une idée, comme on a dit, parler déjà, de collaborer tôt, même si tu ne sais pas qu'est-ce que tu vas faire, juste parler avec eux pour discuter des idées et ça peut t'aider à former et de conseiller votre stratégie pour l'approvisionnement. We'll go to the next question. In your opinion, based on experience, this is an interesting one. Who's responsible for what? I like these questions, right?
Are we going to answer this one?
Who's usually responsible for security requirements or assessments when putting a contract in place? Procurement, business owner, both?
I think you should write down our answers.
Oui, c'est ça. Voir si on a la même réponse. Business owner, in my experience.
But for mine, I would go both in terms of, and I guess it depends how you read the question, but you're right, business owner is responsible for writing the SRCL, documenting what the security is, but as a procurement officer, we still have a role to make sure you've done it.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So we will absolutely validate to make sure that so.
But the answer to the question is the type of, if you go into IT security even more detailed, it's really the business owner that can answer all of that.
And just maybe we talked about this earlier, doesn't mean you have to be an expert in security. You have security experts, right? It's your responsibility to document what the advice they're giving you and make a decision if they're giving you options. But it does end up being your responsibility to talk with security.
Right.
I agree. I think it's both, but there's also security that also has a responsibility in this space, right? So they will take a look at your requirements, business owner, and then they'll say, okay, you have the right security requirements or not to reflect that. So there's three players, in my opinion, in that space.
So I'll give the official Treasury Board answer, which is that ultimately the business owner is responsible for the requirements.
Right.
And the business owner has to be informed by whatever experts they need, including security, including contracting, but the manager, the business owner, is responsible for the requirement, point final. When the contract is put in place, there are responsibilities for, particularly for security and contracting, to make sure those requirements are respected. In some departments, it's the contracting group that is validating the security on behalf of the business owner. Some departments, the business owner has a responsibility. Important to clarify in your department how that process is run, because it does differ from organization to organization. And you can't just assume that it was done by the other party, because that's where nobody does it, and then we have security gaps. But at the end of the day, as the business owner, you are responsible for your requirements, and you are supported in that through the various experts that exist in the process. On a quelqu'un dans la salle qui veut poser une question. Bonjour.
Bonjour. Merci pour la conversation. Richard Deneau de SPAC. So I know at least 3 of the 4 presenters. Marie-Hélène, bonjour.
Bonjour.
My question is, so I'm working in policy, procurement policy right now, and souvent on reçoit des questions, des approvisionnements, puis la réponse est toujours ça dépend. It's almost always it depends. And often we provide an answer after discussion that comes down to it's a business decision, okay? And I wonder, when we say it's a business decision, we being procurement, let's say, does the business owner hear, oh, he said we can do whatever we want to? Or, what do you hear when you hear business decision? And then part 2 for maybe Max and Noshina, Emilio too maybe, what should we be, comment est-ce qu'on devrait encadrer cette phrase? Like what should we include when we say it's a business decision? Merci.
I may be a bit of a different business owner than others, but I think, again, it goes back to our financial delegation and our authorities. So at the end of the day, I know very well as an executive, when I put my name on that contract, I am scared a little bit, just the right level. But I made the decision based on all of the advice that procurement, IT, security, everybody gave me. And I'd much rather you give me a little bit of a sandbox than giving me black and white that does not meet at all my requirements, right? Like, I will own it the moment I put my name on that contract. And again, it goes back to my deputy head's going to go to Parliament and defend it. And yes, I will have to accompany him to that said meeting. But at the end of the day, I don't see it as PSPC gave me the go-ahead and I said yes and I signed it because PSPC told me to. Right? So I think especially when you want to innovate in different fields, like at Parks Canada, we are a bit of an oddball. We don't fit in the boxes. It's different. We're about fun, recreation. We want to make it easy for people with a lot of barriers in terms of IT security and procurement. So when you give me a larger sandbox, I'm happy with that.
I think for part 2, it goes to communication too, right? I'd be very disappointed if we have procurement officers that respond with just, it's a business decision. I know we're stretching your example to the extreme here, but j'aime croire que, puis on a parlé un petit peu de communiquer, puis d'engager early dans la discussion. I think with the business decision, and I know we do have a few probably procurement officers listening in, you have a responsibility as a procurement officer to provide that sandbox that you're talking about. What are the limits of what you can do within that business decision? And that can only happen through communication, right? On doit s'asseoir et discuter avec nos clients. Et puis pour tous les propriétaires fonctionnels qui nous écoutent, si vous ne recevez pas ce service-là de vos agents d'approvisionnement, retournez les voir. Puis dites-leur, regarde, c'est ma décision, mais expliquez-moi, je peux-tu donner le contrat à mon épouse? Ah non, OK, ça c'est trop loin. OK, fait travaillez avec eux pour limiter c'est quoi le sandbox que vous pouvez jouer dedans avec. Là.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's up to us to equip you well to make that decision, right? So there's, varying levels of risk, and it's up to us to show you, okay, here's risk 1 and how high is it and what to think about, the pros and cons, and all the way down to the lowest risk so that you can decide what makes sense for you. But yes, at the end of the day, you have to own it. And I tell that to my business owners too, because it is up to them, but it's our responsibility to equip you well with that.
It's not, like, we talk about a lot of rules in procurement, but at the end of the day, like, most of those rules are principles as opposed to hard, you have to do this rule. And as you mentioned, like, maybe it was because you trained me, Richard, but I always remember one of the first things I learned.
All of us.
Yeah, you did. One of the first things I learned in procurement was the answer to any procurement question is it depends. Like that is, it is a gray. It's an art, not a science to some extent. And so that does mean risk tolerance on certain questions, right? Now, you always have to stick to your fair, open, transparent, and then there are boundaries to that have higher, result in higher risk. But it also means that any kind of procurement decision will come down to what you're trying to do, the risks involved, the risk tolerance of the business owner, and the risk tolerance of the contracting authority. And so sometimes those don't always match up. You could have a very risk-adverse business owner, very risk tolerant, contracting authority, and then you make a decision that's based on that. The flip side can be very frustrating for a lot of managers. They say, well, I'm comfortable taking this risk, and the contracting authority says, no, I'm the one signing the contract, I'm not comfortable with that. So there are ways of course, managing that, having that conversation, but this is something that we need to navigate. And again, I think when we look kind of going forward, the pendulum has focused a lot on risk aversion in the procurement process, of course. And a lot of that is because rules aren't being followed. And so we have to make sure that rules are being followed, that we're respecting those rules. But those rules also provide a lot of flexibility. And with a government that's focused on delivery, we will probably have to look at that calibration as we go forward. But again, those rules are there. They are clear. Auditor General has said it multiple times that they're clear. We just have to make sure they're followed. Question on that side? Merci.
Oui, bonjour. Mon nom est Jean-François Hamelin de Transport Canada. Merci beaucoup pour le panel. We recently seen an increase in the development of artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
From a managerial perspective, do you think that it's going to affect the role of managers? As an example, like defining the scope of work, and what about the integrity that comes up with the use of the artificial intelligence? Thank you.
Interesting question.
That's a new one.
Yeah. No, it's a very good question. I don't know.
Go ahead.
I can jump in. I think we could probably do an entire panel
Yeah.
on that topic.
Yeah.
But je pense que l'approvisionnement, c'est pas différent d'aucune autre région ou groupe au gouvernement or in your private life. I think AI is here. It's part of our life now. But I think in terms of procurement, in terms of the integrity of a procurement process, I think you have to look at it as a tool, right? It's a tool. It doesn't replace your responsibilities as a business owners, my responsibilities as a procurement officer, your security responsibility, for security colleagues. But I do think it's something that can help, right? You can use it to bounce ideas off of it. Sometimes we think we write, I'll go back to my description of a table, and you can describe it as best as you can, and you can write 15 chapters on it. And then we put in an RFP, and we go out, and we have an RFP that ends up being 9 months with 735 questions. So I think...
Is that a dig?
No, but that was my RFP.
Lived experience.
It was a self dig, maybe? I don't know. A joint dig. Good lessons learned from that, though. But I think, it can be a tool where, in that example of my table, you could plug it in there, obviously respecting your department's, protected B and all those measures. But if it's something that can be shared in there, you plug it in there, can you help me, the simple prompts as explain this to a 5-year-old. Oh, now my table is super clear. I can now take that, work with that, build it into your requirements. I don't think we're at a point yet, and hopefully never, but it'll replace all the public servants in terms of, well, now we have, ChatGPT. We don't need to do RFPs anymore. Let's just ask them who the winner is, and they'll tell us which company we can hire, right? But I think it can be a tool that can help, clarify certain things and get us there.
Je veux peut-être amener comme le composant de l'autorité fonctionnelle. Là, on se fait pousser énormément par la haute gestion pour aller avec des services d'intelligence artificielle. Nous, on se pose beaucoup la question parce qu'on est encore là dans un domaine touristique, un peu plus ludique. Les gens peuvent se commander une pizza sur ChatGPT. Moi, j'en ai des vice-présidents qui m'arrivent en me disant « Je peux-tu planifier mon voyage avec ChatGPT? » Tu fais comme « OK, attendez un instant. » Mais comme nous, on se fait pousser là, vos clients, ça veut dire que vous allez devoir nous aider, autant nos équipes de TI, là, mais nous aider à voir comment on les intègre, ces technologies-là, à l'intérieur. Tu sais, si on lit un petit peu ce qui se passe avec le gouvernement en ce moment, puis les lettres de mandat qui sont sorties, il va en avoir de l'IA dans notre environnement. Fait que comment on fait, nous, c'est ce qu'on se demande à part, comment on fait pour influencer? À ce moment-là, moi, tu sais, c'est de définir le carré de sable de l'expérience du visiteur, où est-ce que je veux l'amener, pour aller en amont avec nos exécutifs, dire, bien, c'est là qu'on devrait aller. Ça, c'est trop loin, ça, c'est pas assez. Ça, c'est le sweet spot. Puis après, c'est de travailler avec vous au niveau de l'approvisionnement, comment on peut le faire. Mais c'est pas quand ça va arriver. C'est pas si ça va arriver, c'est quand ça va arriver.
Et je pense qu'il y a des façons aussi, il y a des opportunités qui sont là avec AI aussi, dans le sens où, je fais l'exemple de ChatGPT, c'est un AI qui est public, on peut mettre des choses dessus, mais je pense que il va y avoir des opportunités dans le futur où les gens d'approvisionnement, des propriétaires fonctionnels, on peut travailler avec nos gens d'IT, puis amener l'intelligence artificielle à l'intérieur de nos murs gouvernementaux. Puis, si on peut avoir un genre de AI éventuellement, où je sais qu'il y a des projets qui travaillent déjà là-dessus, mais on rentre tous nos RFP qu'on fait, toutes nos demandes de proposition là-dedans, puis ça nous fait une genre d'analyse. Puis plus tard, quand on achète toujours la même chose, c'est un outil qui peut nous dire, regarde, la dernière fois que vous avez acheté ça, vous avez fait ça, puis ça a causé des problèmes parce que tel et tel critère n'était pas bien défini. Ou des genres de bases de données pour si j'achète des services professionnels. Et voici le genre de critères qui seraient peut-être applicables dans ton cas pour un gestionnaire de projet. Donc, je pense qu'il y a des opportunités là. Je ne suggérerais pas de faire ça avec les outils à l'externe en ce moment, mais c'est des projets, puis vous, comme propriétaire fonctionnel, c'est des projets que vous pouvez certainement aussi mettre de l'avant, d'essayer d'amener ça à l'interne pour vous aider dans le futur. Nishina, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is here, and I think it's a space to watch because it's very rapid what we're seeing that it can do. I don't think that it can replace, to Mac's point of like replacing the bidding process or whatnot. I think it can be a good place to do pulse checks. If you have a statement of work, you can, and it doesn't have any protected information, you can plop it in there and it can maybe help make things more concise. But I would still rely on the business owner to still use their own mind and their eyes to do that review before submitting it to procurement. Same thing with my contracting officers. I would want them to do the same thing. I do that myself with email sometimes, and I'll say, okay, make this sound more formal. And I'll look at it and I say, well, this is not actually what I want it to say, so it's not perfect either. So, and it doesn't sometimes connect all the dots that I want it to either. So I don't think we're there yet, but it's fast-paced. It's coming. It's here. It's just, where is it going to take us?
I'll take it back to the business owner has responsibility for their requirement. And so if you're using a tool to help generate that requirement, that's fine. But you're responsible for that. So you got to make sure that whatever's generated, you're aware of, what you're asking, that you've read it to make sure that it's valid. But in a world where most people have never written a statement of work in their career, and you've been tapped on the shoulder, hey, Andrea, I want you to lead a new transformation initiative, and yeah, you're going to have to write an RFP for a new system that's going to replace our reservation system. Oh my goodness! Okay, maybe I start and say, what does a statement of work look like for a new reservation system? What kind of outcomes should I be asking for? That's a good start, but you still have an accountability for that, and you're still going to have to work with all your experts around security requirements, accessibility requirements, so on. So at the end of the day, that's your responsibility. One thing to watch out for is that bidders are starting to use artificial intelligence to respond to government opportunities. And while that's fine, what it means though is that they may not have a full appreciation of what they committed to in their response. So these are the types of things that are new things to watch out for, right? Which is, does the bidder actually have an appreciation of what they said they would do, particularly if that bid forms part of the contract? And of course, as public servants, maybe we do start using artificial intelligence to help evaluate bids. If we got 1,000 pages from a vendor, right? Currently we have to everyone has to read it, everyone has to score it, and so on. There are tools that we can use, but at the end of the day, there is a policy on decision making using artificial intelligence tools, and it talks about how to make ethical decisions and how to arrive on those decisions, and how humans, at the end of the day, have to make a decision. At the end of the day, it's a tool. On a une autre question en ligne. C'est un peu spécifique à l'approvisionnement nuagique. Donc, c'est une question que est-ce que notre discussion change dans le contexte de l'approvisionnement nuagique? So, does the role of managers versus procurement change for procuring a cloud or software as a service procurement? Thoughts?
Well, in my recent experience, to have two different systems that are all cloud-based, I am the business owner because it is not a business enterprise solution. So it's not something that the entire agency would use. It's very focused towards visitors. So being the business owner, we ended up being the ones procuring with strong help from our IT and obviously procurement folks. But at the end of the day, the end goal and the need we had is very niche in the government setting, but for 20 million people, but niche in the Government of Canada setting. For us, if it is something that would be a business enterprise, so used across the agency, that would be like IT that would be leading on things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just that point, like one of the things we're seeing on the big IT initiatives is this question of who's the business owner on a big IT initiative.
Yeah.
Is it the IT organization? Is it the program area responsible? These are things that departments are actually struggling with.
Yeah.
Who owns the project? But not just who owns the project. It's an IT solution. The IT is doing a lot of the work, but it's in support of a program area. And so, who's managing the vendor? Who wrote the RFP? These are important questions that actually, like the bigger and more complex IT initiatives, struggle with. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ultimately, like my personal view is that it's the program trying to deliver something. And they, again, may be relying on IT heavily, but program trying to deliver a service to Canadians is ultimately generally where the business owner lands. Like who's got the money? Typically, it's not IT with the money. Mm-hmm. It's the program area. But
another good one too is
you've been involved in some of these big.
Well, I've said this before too, and just maybe with my clients, but I've always said, if I pull this requirement, if I cancel this contract, who's going to scream the loudest, right? So that's a good way to identify your business owners at times as well. Like, if I don't do the thing you want to do, who's the most upset about it? Probably won't be IT because they have other projects to move on. And to your point, I think it would be the program trying to deliver it. And then just to kind of close on this question too, I do think I don't think it matters what you are buying when you're speaking about federal public procurement. I think the roles remain the same. As a business owner, you have the same responsibilities. Je pense que la question vient tout bien d'un endroit où ça, c'est au niveau des approvisionnements. Comment tu appelles ça?
Nuagique.
Okay.
Cloud.
J'ai toujours appelé ça cloud, mais ça, c'est de mon côté franco-ontarien.
Oui.
Mais tu parles de cloud. C'est quelque chose qui est plus récent. Fait que, je pense qu'il y a des challenges, c'est un petit peu plus difficile à savoir exactement comment est-ce qu'on va l'acheter, comment ça fonctionne. C'est certain que depuis plusieurs années, on a des experts, ASPAC, ASSC, qui se sont très bien informés et qui sont rendus un peu plus experts dans le domaine. Mais je pense que la question vient plus parce que c'est nouveau. Tu pourrais prendre le même exemple avec... I know we invent, teleportation tomorrow. Well, I can tell you right now, my officers would not know where about to go to start buying that and how and the impacts. But the responsibilities remain the same. You're still responsible to defining your requirement. We're still responsible to ensuring a fair, open, transparent procurement. Doesn't matter what you're buying.
So one of the other questions we have here is around vendor performance. And so the question is a bit specific to departments. Some departments have vendor performance policies. Is there a template for this? So let's just talk about maybe more generally, like vendor performance, approaches to managing issues with vendors. Maybe I'll start with Marie-Hélène from a manager perspective. Like, have you encountered situations where your vendors are not performing, and how are you approaching dealing with that?
Yes, and it goes back a little bit to what you were saying earlier. We're very Canadian and we want to be really nice. And a lot of times, like I remember one of my colleagues was like, "Oh, they're our partners." And I was like, well, for the price we pay them, I mean, like, sure, like I want a good relationship,
Right.
but they're paid to do the work. Is it being done? So yes, we do it without being a policy. We do have in each contract something that is an evaluation, that consistently reviewing performance, or whenever we launch big initiatives, we kind of do a post-mortem and figure out, okay, how did that go? And it's happened. I think we've mentioned it a little bit earlier, but as a business owner, it's also really important to have the guts that when the contract is not going well, or the service provider, the vendor is not giving you what you need to move in the different steps. I've had to terminate a contract with PSPC for a vendor that was not going to be able to deliver what we needed after 1 year only. It's scary because you're like, oh my God, I'm going to go back through RFP, and I don't want to do that. But I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we, it's taxpayer dollars at the end of the day, right? So super important.
No, music to my ears. I mean, no, I think you're right. We talked about this a bit earlier in terms of the role of a business owner. You're the one that's doing the work. You're the one that's closely working with the vendor. So if there are issues, as procurement officers, we rely heavily on you to tell us. Sometimes your officer could be managing a dozen, 15, 20, 30 contracts. They don't necessarily have the time to spend and monitor every single one of them, but if there's an issue that's raised, their time will shift to, helping you and solve that issue. So I think, ultimately, I think it would rest with the business owner, but again, you have questions, bring in your procurement officer.
Yep, I agree. I mean, we're none the wiser, right? So until you flag it to us and that you need help if you're not sure how to navigate it, we're there to support. But yeah, I'm glad to hear what you guys are doing. That's great.
It's not fun.
No, it's not easy for sure, but it has to be done, right?
Absolutely. Donc, avec quelques minutes qui restent, peut-être, we'll do a final lightning round, a minute each. What advice would you give to managers trying to navigate the procurement world?
Engage early. Our most is, as soon as you think you might have a procurement, not you have one, you think you might have one, bring in your procurement team. Have that conversation, and they'll be there to advise you.
I think sit down with a friendly colleague, because I'm trying to add to what you guys are going to say. Like, being a business owner and you're not familiar with finance and procurement is super scary. Like, you feel like you're not, you guys are speaking jargon sometimes to us, right? But like those kind of lunch and learns and asking a colleague in procurement for coffee without the pressure of doing a contract, for me, that's what was helpful at the beginning, and understanding, okay, how do I navigate this within my agency before I get to a point where I need to ask you questions and then I don't understand what you're telling me. Yeah.
I would say plan and also engage early. Tap into the resources that you have available to you, and if you don't know, ask. Someone will help you. I think whatever domain you're looking at, HR, procurement, finance, IT, everyone wants to help each other. That's what I found. Some people are scared to talk about it though, but if you just ask, people will help you. So just ask. Everyone's there to help.
Fantastic advice, and I'll maybe kind of cap that off with saying, like, as a manager, you're not expected to be an expert, but I'll go back to what I said before. You are expected to know what your responsibilities are, and to exercise those appropriately. And so, one of the things I highlighted at the beginning is that business owners have responsibilities under policy. Many of them don't realize that because it's just the procurement policy. Well, I'm not a procurement officer. Why would I read the procurement policy? Well, because there are specific responsibilities that you have, and that you should be aware of them. We've inserted reminders into the procurement process now. Many departments have various controls. We now have formal requirements that remind you of these responsibilities. And again, it's not to scare you. It's actually to help you and help you know what those responsibilities are and help support you in achieving them. So with that, I'd like to extend a big thanks to Maxime, Marie-Hélène, Noshina for your participation today as panelists, to all the members in the room and online for engaging in this conversation with us. As you've heard, the role of managers or business owners is key to the success of a procurement process. You are responsible, accountable, but you have friends. They are there to help you. Engage with them early, engage with them often. Les gestionnaires ne devraient pas hésiter à demander de l'aide supplémentaire auprès de collègues bien versés dans ce domaine au sein de leur organisation. Vous avez tout un groupe d'approvisionnement quelque part, souvent dans le groupe de finances, qui est là pour t'aider. Soit tu peux parler avec tes superviseurs, le cadre désigné pour l'approvisionnement, les autorités contractantes sont toutes là encore pour t'aider. Même s'ils ne sont pas dans l'approvisionnement, des personnes qui ont participé dans les approvisionnements dans le passé peuvent t'aider, donner des conseils, des avis, et tout le monde est là pour t'aider. It's not scary if you have the right help. Piece of that, as I mentioned at the beginning, a piece of heavy equipment can be scary at first, but if someone teaches you how to use it, gives you a respectful fear of where you can get hurt, but with the right training, with the right support, you're fine. TBS will soon be sharing some additional resources for business owners on our investment management GC Exchange site. So we are actively using GC Exchange now here within the Treasury Board Office Controller General. We have a site, just for people that aren't aware, Procurement is part of the broader investment management policy suite. And so when you hear the investment management community, Procurement falls underneath that. And that's where you'll find our information. Vos commentaires sont très importants et je vous invite à remplir l'évaluation électronique pour la présente séance que vous recevrez au cours des prochains jours. L'école aussi vous proposera d'autres événements et de vous encourager à consulter le site web pour obtenir les renseignements les plus récents et vous inscrire à prochaine occasion d'apprentissage. As I mentioned as well, we soon have some training coming out, introductory training, yes, for procurement officers, but actually quite beneficial to business owners and managers. We are updating the authority delegation training, which is coming in the near future. And these are all going to be additional resources that are there to support you as managers. We have the Manager's Guide, Key Considerations for Procuring Professional Services on our website, which is a great tool for helping someone that is about to engage on needing consultant or some kind of services. Our guide for conflict of interest, as well, a great tool to help support the integrity of the process. So after all those pitches, with that, I hope that you have enjoyed today's session. It was Friday the 13th, which I didn't say at the beginning, not to jinx us, but I think it was a great day. I wish you a wonderful one. J'espère que vous avez aimé l'événement d'aujourd'hui et je vous souhaite une excellente journée. Merci beaucoup.